Okay, we're good.
All right, welcome everybody to a HackFS workshop. This time we've got one of our sponsors and partners, 3Box, with us. Zach Ferland, an engineer with 3Box, is going to be giving an intro, an overview, and some code walkthrough to what 3Box actually is and how you can use it in your project. So thank you, Zach, for taking the time to teach us a little bit about the project today. If everybody doesn't know, the week 1 check-ins are happening today and yesterday. So make sure to check out your cohort channel, drop an update about what you've been working on, what your project is. It's always interesting to see where different people are at different stages. And then once we have that information, the ETHGlobal team is able to kind of help you get rid of any blockers or challenges that you're facing. So make sure to do that. If you're not in the cohort channel, it might be because you haven't created your project name yet or added a project. So the way you get around that is by going to your Hacker dashboard and just creating something. It can be a placeholder name, but just make sure to do that. And then we'll get you in a cohort, and then the little logistics things will be all settled for the rest of the event. Before we jump into it, does anybody want to give a 1-sentence update for what they've been working on? Just 1 sentence, nothing too long. You can put it in the chat. You can unmute. I'm just curious where people are at, if they want to share anything.
Yeah,
there we go.
Say a bit.
Animal, yeah.
Yeah, so we have been working for implementing verifiable credentials document on top of Ceramic. So yeah,
cool. Ceramic. Cousins with 3Box. This is right on topic. Anybody else? We'll take one more before we jump into it.
Sure. I'm working on a contacts app. It's hopefully going to be able to allow you to enter your own contact information, but then, subscribe to other people. And then you slowly build up a contacts address book, but you're not updating any of the contact information other than your own. And you're just getting the information from other people.
Awesome. You guys are both in the right place to learn about 3Box and user IDs, contacts, stuff like that. This is perfect. All right, Zach, I will let you take it away and start your work.
Great. Yeah, thanks for the intro. It's like Trent said, I'm going to do basically a little intro and then walk through some of the things we have, a brief overview, and then probably just show some of the code and kind of dive a little deeper, since we are built on IPFS and OrbitDB, kind of show what like some of the underlying things look like below our API. I can share screen here, right? So open that up. All right, cool. Let's see. So yeah, we're 3Box, and the gist of it is we provide a user-centric data and identity layer for your applications. So basically what that means is you can authenticate with an Ethereum account, and then you get access to this keychain that which you can then link data, link other accounts, permission data. Then you can kind of take that and build these other perimeters on top of it. So some of the most common use cases we saw early was profiles, for example. So one of the things you can do is you can link an Ethereum account, and then you can link it to all its profile data. So you can write data to a public store. These things look like just basically key value stores. So you could add a name, an image, you can link a Twitter proof, that kind of thing. And then other people are able to resolve this data in this DB. Like I said, this is all in IPFS. Part of this is as well is there's also a private space, so you can also encrypt data with the same keychain. And if you, for example, go to one app and then go open it up in another, you could authenticate there and resolve the same data there as well. So you end up with this like shared local cache across applications. Beyond that, there's also these things called spaces. So in a similar theme, you end up permissioning data to the application. So if you're running an application, you don't have to run any backends or anything. you kind of create a space and a user can store the stuff. You get this key value store, and then users can store stuff, and you can write stuff to the space for the user. And the same thing, they could bring that and permission that data to another application if they wanted. So it provides you all the ways to do that. So I'll see here, a good place to start if you're building on it is kind of come to our docs here. And this has a walkthrough of basically the different pieces. I said all separated here. It's like what identity looks like, auth profiles, these storage mechanisms. Yeah, and I guess I forgot this, messaging. So on top of these things, you can also then, using the same primitives, is basically build threads and chat systems and things like that. So say you have like something like a comment system, you can resolve profiles. You can also have the comments in a thread. And these data structures can be shared basically with libpp and IPFS. So we'll see some of those. Yeah, these kind of go in kind of detail. If you want a quick start, the main thing you'll be interacting with is something called 3box.js. So it's our main JavaScript library. And if you're going to implement this on your app, you just pull this library in and then use these auth functions here and these write and read functions. So I'll go through those in a moment. Often when people are first starting, they kind of implement. So we do have a few things that are easy to pop in your projects besides just like if you were going to build your whole like data layer on 3box alone, you could. A lot of people start with these. We have a few basic React plugins that kind of show and give you a good idea what this stuff looks like. I was just saying. So one of the things, what I said was like profiles. So like a lot of places, dApps are showing just Ethereum addresses, like in leaderboards or comments or anything else. Instead of showing that, you can actually show a hover that resolves those data for the profile. It's kind of like showing what it looks like here. It's like you're showing an address before in a leaderboard. So some people are implementing these where instead of showing addresses, you can have it resolve to data in the profile. Like I said, you can actually have verifiable links to like GitHub and Twitter in here. And then there's just like this kind of metadata images I attach that are stored in IPFS and names and stuff like that. So now you can bring this, any of the stuff you don't want to store on chain, or instead of storing like as just an unstructured blob in IPFS, now you have a way to resolve this data and bring it into your own app or see it in other places. Another one of those plugins is comments plugin. So I was saying before, so what the comments actually look like. Here's like an example of it here. So it's all built in 3box in a space in a thread. And again, they're resolving 3box profiles here. And these data this data is stored in a log here. All these comments are signed. Like I said, if you're listening to this live, you'd actually be listening to the same thread. So in every 3box, anytime you're using 3box.js, you're actually running an IPFS node in the browser. And that's actually connecting to basically pub sub runs for these same DBs and topics. So you can get updates here. So anytime I write a comment here, that'd be sent out to other peers or through our printing service as well. So this is one of the implementations. Another one is these kind of chat boxes, similar. So these have been some of the easy ways that people have quickly added some social features into their apps. Let's see. So I'll go over to a little bit of a demo now, kind of what it looks like underneath and some of the pieces we're actually doing. Kind of like what our infra setup looks like. Yeah, during this part, like feel free to ask any questions at any point. And at the end, we'll save a bunch of time to basically help with anyone who already started like some implementations or has any questions about what we're doing. We also mentioned ceramic before, probably can mention it a little bit at the end, but this will mostly just be like 3box part, and it'll give kind of an idea of what drove like thinking about ceramic after. So we see here, so this is not too fancy of an example app. It's just a simple page using 3box.js. Like I said, it's already connected. So when I authenticate here, let's see, I might have to reload this. Yeah, so part of this is we have this thing called 3D Connect now. So the keychain, basically all your underlying keys are now managed in this iframe. Eventually they could be like in other wallets or in MetaMask, and they could have like a similar RPC layer for these kind of like identity or permissioning functions. Right now, like I said, it's an iframe. So this is basically asking me when I authenticate, I sign a message, and then I'm deriving a keychain from that for use in 3box. So right here it says basically, do I want to use my profile? It also asks me if I want to access like a space after if I open one of those. So I'll press continue here. This is an account I already had. So already like signed initial message. I have this keychain available already. And yeah, so one of the things that helps us link this all together, like identity is a big part of being able to permission this data, build to manage your keys, build to bring it to different contexts like this. So we use something called DIDs. These are decentralized identifiers. Basically, the idea is you end up with this opaque identifier that you can use that then to resolve like key material, mainly like, for example, you can use this identifier to resolve public keys. So if you're signing data in any way, you can resolve it to this identifier and then verify those data payloads. The idea being you don't have to resolve it with any centralized one. You could have these different, basically anyone can implement different DID methods. Ours is a specific one to us, the 3box. So you see the prefix here. And our DID implementation is also implemented on IPFS. So you could probably recognize this right here. So like that doc, I think I'll show that after. But like I said, the main thing we do right now is you take this DID and then you can link it to an Ethereum address. And what this does here is this is creating a proof. Like I said, I'm signing it with for example, my ETH key. And I'm also signing it with my DID keychain after as well. And that creates a proof that anyone else can resolve these two things and see that these two things are linked to each other. So you can see here, for example, I'll get this right here. Let's see, so I have the box object on the window. I'll just get it from. Oops. Yeah, so these DIDs, like I said, ours are in IPFS. So if you're using our DID resolver, which is this 3, it resolves this IPFS object, and you can see what this actually looks like. So, for example, this has the keys here. Like the signing key also has these other key material here. So you can see in this one, as my signing key. So this is, yeah. So if anyone, you'll see after once I sign this data in here, I'm basically resolving this DID and I'm getting the signing key, and then I can verify that payload. As encryption key, management key is just the ETH address. So that's kind of how you update these kind of documents. Right now you get the single document, but in the future, like in the context of Ceramic, you could link lots of accounts. You could do key rotations, all that kind of things. But right now it looks just like this. So yeah, so like I said, we have this public store. This is kind of where most of the profile stuff is. So I can just add something here. So I set some data. So that's these values here. Yeah. Now I have the same example open. Just add another domain here. So I'll open it up there as well. Yeah, so like I was saying, if you go to another domain now, it's going to look similar to like, you'll see again, basically 3ID Connect will pop up. So now I'm on another domain. It's saying like, do I want to now permission this data and give access to this page to be able to like, decrypt the space or load that data. So I'll press continue. Now this domain get access to resolve the rest of that and open it up here. So I could do the same like in a private store and have access to this keychain inside the iframe to decrypt this data. So you can imagine like this would be a different app, and you need to be able to bring this space and this data here and load it. Yeah. so it's going to show here. So like I said, 3box is built on OrbitDB, which is this DB layer built on top of IPFS. And they implement these basically these data logs. So it's an easy way to get like, for a profile, for example, if you're implementing an app, you might just throw that data in a blob, push it to IPFS, and you end up with this unstructured data that no one else can resolve or verify, and it's hard to update. So if you're going to update it, you'd be pushing a new object each time. This is like a good way to build key value stores on top of it, and you do that by building an underlying chain and log of values. So it's kind of like a change log. Some people might be familiar, I guess, with CRDTs. That's what that's the format for Orbit. So you can show like what the underlying data actually looks like that you're seeing here. So I just opened up the underlying values. As you can see, each one of these entries is an IPLD. So you get these CIDs right here, these hashes. Each one of the entries, these resolve to these objects here. You can see this metadata. Let's talk about the identities. So you see the actual payload here. Like, so the cool thing is they're signed with these DIDs. So it's an identity. Also, this right here is just creating a proof also to, you have like a temporal key in the browser. This is also creating a link between this DID and that key. Signing this payload here. And like I said, you can resolve then the public key through the DID-doc, verify this payload. And now anyone else can load this data and verify it. You don't need the trust where it came from. Just like you have the trust where, like what the data is. So another peer, if they would have the same DB open or want to listen to it, I could write an update here. They could get this. They could verify that this came from this DID, and the context could be like verify, like it came from this Ethereum address, for example. So you can see some of the logs here. So these things build a chain of values. You can see this is referencing the next, so the prior entry, and that is one of these objects up here again, I guess. So yeah, like this one right here. And yeah, the cool thing is if you wrote these two pages could be entirely disconnected. If they were offline, I could write values to both. Once I come back online, I can share these with one peer or another, and then build a similar chain locally again, verify it, and then construct this kind of key value store here. One of the things we have that kind of makes it possible right now is we run a 3box pinning service. So all this data is pinned in our infrastructure right now. Also, like I said, if other peers are open at the same time, like in the thread, you'd be storing all that thread data on your client in the browser. So each one, you have all these local caches. But like I said, if any of those go offline or they're not available to sync it, we are like storing and syncing it all on ours. Eventually we want like a bunch of service providers to provide similar services, or you'd even be able to select different providers in different contexts, and either choose like, let's say if you want to put it in persist it through Filecoin, or you want to just persist it in some other form through some service provider that has some guarantees. Yeah, so let's see. And like I was saying before, if you're actually implementing your application, it looks the same, but you would you might make a separate space for your app. So this is permissioning it separately. So it's asking me again, like, do I want to give this app access to this space? So I'm going to say yes. Signing a thing here. So confirming. So then I got the space, and like if I had an application, I could just have this. And then if I went to another app, so they might ask, oh, can you use my app space? I'll say yes. The same thing here. And this kind of, it doesn't allow granular permission like over at separate keys right now, but this is a good way to kind of get a similar effect. The last thing I'll show quickly is that we have threads as well, and these are built on the same underlying logs. Instead of building key value stores, you just have a, you have an ordered list of comments or other kind of data or event changes or whatever you need there. So I'll open the thread. Let's see. Actually, I'll create a confidential thread. So we do have a few options for threads. You can create a public one. Anyone can write to it. You can create one with one or more moderators, and moderators can delete comments and stuff. You can create a members only thread, which basically has these actual controllers for just allowing certain DIDs or certain Ethereum addresses to write data to that thread. And then similarly, you can have member ones, which are also encrypted to a set of members. So I'll just create a thread here. See what space I'm in. Create thread. As you can see on the moderator, I do have, so this is the ID here for this space. There's a thread address. I'll write some things. Come to this. Yes, I'll come to this page and let's see, I'll open up the same space. Actually, what was it called? Yeah, my app. So it's open. Let's see, got the same. Actually, I could just, this time I'll just open it by thread address. Oop, I don't know if it's actually, I might have disconnected. I don't know if it reconnected. Let's see. Oh, I'll try to come back to that after. It's also less interesting with the same user. But if you had multiple users, you basically opening these up. You could add other thread members. And so that's managed to an access controller where basically you're creating a separate encryption key for the thread. And like I said, just like now you have these ADs, you can resolve these public keys, you can encrypt it to their public keys and have these in the access controller. They can then fetch this data, then get that key and decrypt these entries. So that's what usually would happen here. Yeah, this is the most of it. I'm glad to, actually, I mean, I guess to say the last thing, one thing we do using library as well, one of the things we also run based on API service that kind of, it indexes these DBs as well. So you don't always have to open up my IPFS instance in the browser, sync that data. We also index most of the public data. So like profiles and spaces, and you can get that through the library as well. That doesn't allow you to write it, but you can quickly read data from any of the public items and public threads as well. Let's see. I guess I'm not getting this one. Oh, there we go. It's just loading kind of slow. Anyways, there we go. Finally, eventually loaded these entries here. So if I type something here, we'll see it. We get it pretty quickly here. Same thing. As a moderator, I can delete posts. Like I said, they do stay in the underlying log still. So the underlying data is still there. I'll show quickly just what these look like. They look pretty similar. So I'll do, let's see. Yeah, so similarly, like here's the log, here's the values, payloads. Let's see what these look like here. So you can see that these are just encrypted values. And then quickly I'll show, basically like I said, these have also access controllers, and these access controllers are stored in a similar way in a log. So I can get that and do same thing. So I'll read all the logs out from here. The access controller just has one entry right now, since I was just added as a moderator when I created it. What I basically do is you create, it's who the DID is, capability, and like I said, then you can resolve the public key, for that DID and encrypt the key for this thread to that user. So if I was going to add someone else, it'd similarly do the same thing, create an entry here. Then when I sync all this stuff locally, if I have access to it, I'll be able to get that key and decrypt it. Yeah, so that's the just the 3-box right now. I can take any questions. I see there's some things in the chat. Let me see. Yeah, is there anything you want to do for the format for questions? Do you just ask them in the chat or open it up if anyone wants to ask anything?
Yeah, it looks like some people have written out questions, but I see Danny and maybe some other people.
Oh, Danny's here too. Yeah, Danny.
Is there anybody who hasn't had their question answered and just wants to jump in with audio?
Hey, can I ask?
Sure.
Yes, so so I'm trying to join a confidential thread using an identity wallet instance, but it doesn't work. Like it just stops. Like when I'm able to join a public thread, but then confidential threads, the join by thread address method just doesn't resolve.
Okay. Yeah, I can look into that after this. We did have, yeah, just for context, like for everyone else, we also have something called Identity Wallet, which manages the keys just specific to 3-box. So if you're authenticating 3-box alone, you could use Identity Wallet to basically manage the DID and the keychain here for 3-box. So if you're running a server or you want to like link accounts in a different way, you can use Identity Wallet. Or if you didn't have like context where you could get a Web3 provider, because otherwise that's the interface right now. Yeah, I think we tested a little bit less with the Identity Wallet, so I can sync with you on, she'll sync with you on Slack after.
Sure, that works. Thank you.
Cool.
Is it possible to log in via MetaMask or another wallet or something like that? Or I can see on the homepage, you can kind of do that when I log into the 3-box website.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so right now, 3-box always takes any Web3 provider to use an authentication method to drive the keys for 3-box.
And how do you hook into that in your code? How do you make it pop up the box basically that lets somebody log in?
Yeah, so that's all part of the 3-box library. So right here, that's one thing we didn't really see. So you step to the docs here. Basically, if you're going to use it, you just create a box and then you authenticate a user. And at this point, that's when it's going to use. So that kind of iframe thing is called, it's 3ID Connect. It's just another thing. I said it's actually running Identity Wallet, which I was just talking about to manage the keys.
Yeah.
But when you do that, it'll basically ask whatever Web3 provider that's passed here. So you pass the provider here.
And would that be kind of MetaMask or Web Connect and those kind of things? And then it will pop up the relevant sort of boxes for those.
Yeah, exactly.
I've got a kind of architecture I'm thinking of using. I want to sanity check it. I'm going to have some databases which are going to be using, I think, textiles buckets. And the idea is that one user might have access to 5 or 6 buckets or something like that. And so each bucket would have its own private key. And my idea was to maybe put those private keys in the private part of 3-box so that a number of people could all have access to the same bucket. And, you know, there's no way of removing access, but it gives me a way of sharing groups. Is that a good use of 3-box? Is that a good way of architecting it, or is there a better way of doing something like that?
Yeah. I don't know if it's the best way, but definitely like in a hackathon, a good way to like kind of get a similar thing. An abstraction is to use like a thread as a log to manage it, similar to how we're doing like an access controller. So you could use like the DIDs here and one of the confidential threads to basically create a log of a way to share key materials or like access through that to other things. So I don't know if you're gonna have like separate keys, but if you had just like a single key that you're creating each time, you could then like store that in a log, and like I said, same as our access controllers, basically.
So my buckets are going to behave as if they're users, basically. So the buckets are each going to have their own private key, and then you may have in your 3 box, you might have access to 6 buckets. Therefore, you've got 6 private keys in there, and then other people might have access to these same buckets.
Yeah, and then to share access, you're saying you have to share the key.
You have to share the private key somehow. Not quite sure
Yeah.
the best mechanism for doing that, but yeah.
Yeah. No, I think usually a thread's a good way to manage that, and to manage that between users, probably like any of that kind of metadata.
Yeah.
Like I said, it might not be optimal overall. You might want to, as part of like I said, actually part of like the DD method, or just have these extra keys there, and eventually like the stuff we want to do in Ceramic makes it easier to like link these accounts and permission keys and access and manage basic keys at that level.
Can be, how do I share a thread between a selected group of users? How do I make it so that other people can't see that thread? How do I get somebody to join a thread or invite somebody to join a thread?
Yeah, for confidential threads, the only thing you have to keep track of is like the thread address here.
Yeah.
And then with that, they could resolve any of it. Sometimes the thing that's hard is you have to know like the DID. Well, I guess, or just you have to know the ETH address or the DID of the other users you want to invite to it if it's an encrypted thread. If it's just a public one and you want to like encrypt stuff yourself or manage it some other way, then you just have to know the thread address, and anyone can resolve that without any extra action.
Yeah.
Did anybody else want to unmute and ask their questions? I see a few more in the chat.
And Danny from the 3Box team is here as well. I don't know, Danny, if you want to give a brief thing on Ceramic after or not.
I would have a very simple one. Are there contracts on Ethereum testnets for 3Box?
So there's no contracts for.
It's just transaction, right? That's anchoring. So there's no.
Yeah, there's actually no transactions at all right now. It just uses an Ethereum account. It just needs another key pair as a way to authenticate and manage the keychain here as well.
So it's all about the signature and not so much about the transaction.
Yeah, exactly. So it could actually be on any testnet, it could be used across them, and you can easily link other chains and other things in the future as well, as long as you have a key to drive that and authenticate to this keychain.
Exactly.
Danny, did you want to talk about Ceramic a little bit? If you can jump on audio. I should probably check if he's still here. Maybe not. Audio issues. Yeah, sometimes if you have wireless headphones, they don't like Zoom.
Yeah. But anyways, yeah, the gist of it is like going beyond what we kind of built here and taking all our learnings here. Is Ceramic's one of the things we're working on. And a lot of the same things like how we're managing. So like right now it resolves like basically all these links in to data to other accounts, to managing your keys, permission of those keys is something you can do in these documents in Ceramic. So idea being like you also don't have to just use, because there's some limitations for this kind of data structure. So like using CRGs in some contexts makes a lot of sense, but there's also pretty slow syncing it often. You might want a spectrum of different properties depending on your application. So the idea here is like you eventually be able to resolve it to other data stores and other service providers for any services you needed, whether it's like persisting data or anything else. So you could actually use like 3IDs with Textile as well. Other basically like any other database layers like that as like the identity provider in those. So you could be signing stuff and resolving keys through Ceramic and 3IDs. And then the same thing, like if you need certain other properties below that, like say you need an index and service, need like a persistence layer, anything like that, you could have, basically you would have these documents that point to these service providers and kind of say how you want to deal with this data, what kind of relationship you have there, and then other people can resolve these things as well. Yeah, I think we can talk more about that and follow-up stuff, or you'll find us on Slack as well.
We're just
Yep,
gonna see if we can get the call-in number if Danny wants to call in and give some more context. So we'll just hang on for one more second. Any hackers want to share if they plan to use 3box or kind of what ideas they're working on right now, specifically related?
Yeah, is it okay for me to go?
Sure.
I mentioned a little bit about this in the comments on Zoom, but I'm kind of putting off working on this bigger project and focusing on a smaller thing because the bigger project, I don't think I would be able to get it done within the hackathon. But the bigger project is making it possible for giving an application that allows a user to manage their data and then just tie in identity, like different identities to a segment of that data. Maybe also doing it through these profiles that are set to be either read or write. Maybe those profiles follow a schema of some sort so that multiple different apps of a similar type could know how to access the data that it's getting access to through that profile. And then you tie that identity to the profile, and then you can log in with that identity, and it automatically has access to the subset of data that you've connected to it. And the application, now has access to that identity, whatever you need to do. But you have this management tool that manages all the data and connects that data to these profiles and then the identities to the profile. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, if you think that that's like really close or really far away, or what needs to come into what needs to be developed to make that happen now?
Yeah, it's definitely close to a lot of problems we're thinking about with Ceramic. So I was saying like right now it's very limited into the missing, even though we have the structured. So like first case that people were just storing when they're building dApps and they weren't putting stuff on chain. Like so they just put it like in a blob in IPFS. It's like one step I was at least putting it in some structured form and having it like in some basic like key value form that other people can read it. But still practically like it's hard without schemas to like really know how to resolve and like actually consume that data in an easy way in a different context. So that's still kind of hard, like creating that mechanism to do it. And like I said, you definitely want to like people have a spectrum of needs for their apps, and like this is not going to be the one for all of them. So like people might want to just be able to push bigger files, push stuff in different structure. So you'd hope like that kind of metadata and that kind of coordination takes place like in these kind of documents in some form. Like I said, that like you're saying, it has all these links, and you might resolve it through, it could be any like underlying data provider, and then the schema is separate, and the identities could also be resolved through like a 3ID here, or like any other DID provider as well, if there's any other identities. So it makes a lot of sense.
When I initially started thinking about this, it looked like Ceramic was the tool I would need to use, but I've been focused totally on 3box. Would Ceramic be that tool, or in the future, would it be the one tool that I would need to use and 3box would just be an implementation? Or would I still continue to use 3box as like the developer-friendly API for Ceramic underneath? Because I know that 3box plans to use Ceramic too.
Yeah, exactly. But like I said, 3box would just be like most of the stuff in 3box, like all the stuff you saw with like links and like permissioning stuff, like schemas, access control would be in Ceramic instead of 3box. And 3box would more look like, would actually almost just be like OrbitDB with like this identity layer. and like a way to resolve that stuff through Ceramic. That's why it's kind of like an iteration of where we're moving this identity stuff, the links, the ID stuff out of like what's 3box now, more into Ceramic.
Do you know
yeah,
when the library from Ceramic would be available to start using? I know it exists right now, but I also I've read that it's still heavily under development.
Yeah, it's pretty early. I think some teams here are trying to create basically some of these documents. So like the format for what like a schema would look like or how you would resolve data to like different service providers and stuff. So I think some people are exploring that. We have like basic ways to create the documents, checkpoint them and stuff and verify them. But yeah, it's not used in 3box.js yet. That will be coming in like, it's still a few months out. And then that would be the point where we're able to like attach other providers and other identities and stuff.
Cool, thanks, man.
Yeah, but we definitely love input to like how you'd imagine like connecting these things in some way, and if it makes sense to fit in these documents or how they would look like. Yeah.
Danny, did you want to add anything to that? Looks like you got in successfully.
Yeah, I think I'm here. I didn't catch a lot of the review Zach gave, but it sounded like he covered a lot of it. But are there specific questions that more context is useful on?
I will leave that to the people in the chat. Did most of the questions get answered?
All of my questions got answered. Although I would love to keep talking about Ceramic if there's something more that there is to cover, but maybe we've covered everything.
Yeah, I think we also talked about doing a separate session on Ceramic maybe sometime next week. So we can dive deep into that then as well.
All right, Zach, if there's nothing else you'd like to cover, we could probably wrap up there.
Yep, that's good. And I'm in now. I think this will find me. 3box. I'll be in the box channel as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you for going through all this stuff, and there was some good discussion as well. Appreciate you and Danny hopping in, answering some questions. This is going to be useful for people, and like all of the workshops, we recorded it. So if anybody missed something or wants to go back through, this will be available on the ETHGlobal YouTube channel, and we'll make sure to drop it in the 3box channel as well in the HackFS Slack. All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming out, and we'll see you in Slack.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.